Irish, Scottish, and English names. This is page 1. And these names all mean swarthy by being described as dark complexions, black complexions, and brown complexions. Okay, I have listed here the names, meanings, and origins. Some of these names are going to look familiar to you, and then some, of course, will not, if you're not from Ireland, Scotland, or England. Also, as I said in my first video, my pronunciation may be a little bit off, or a lot off actually, so please don't hold that against me, but I'll do the best that I can. And also, I'm not going to read through all the names on the list. I'll go through some of them, mostly the ones that I can pronounce. So the first one there is Arthur, and the meaning is very black. The origin is Welsh or Brythonic language. So that immediately reminds me of King Arthur. And if the meaning is very black, that's something interesting. The second one there on the list is Bran, and the meaning of that is crow or raven. And we should all know that crows and ravens are very black in color. And the origin of that name Bran is Welsh. Okay, so I'm going to skip down to Brenna, which means little raven, and that has an Irish origin. Next we have Cormac, which means raven's son, and that is of Irish origin as well. Now let's skip down to Sierra, which means black or dark, and that's Irish or Gaelic in origin. Then we have Kerwin, which means dark-skinned, and that is Celtic in origin. And then we have, let's go down to Kerry, which means dark, little dark one, or dark princess. Wow, and that's Irish or Gaelic. Then we have the common name that we all know is Blake, which means black, and that's English in origin. Then we will go down to Dubon, which means brown or dark, and that's Irish in origin. And then let's go up to the top of the second list, and we have Duff, which means dark, and that's Scottish in origin. Then we have Dougal, which means dark stranger, and that's Scottish in origin. Then we have Dolan, which means dark in Irish, or Irish origin. Then we have Douglas, very common name, and that means dark, and that's Gaelic in origin. And then let's go to Duncan, which means swarthy chief, and we all know that swarthy means dark, dark complexion, black, brown, dark brown, and that's Celtic in origin. Then last on the list there is Kerry, which means dark, and that's Irish in origin, and Kerry is also a very common name. Didn't know it meant dark. And I don't think the parents of these folks are calling them dark in a bad way, like they're a bad person or they have bad intentions or something like that. I think the word dark and the meaning behind these names are a descriptor of what their child looked like or what the family resembled, if it's a family name, because these are first and or last names. Okay, so let's get into the second section under Irish, Scottish, and English names. And these are additional names, meanings, and origins, and this is page 2. Okay, so that first one on the list there is Darcy, and that means dark, and it's of Irish origin. Then we have Devon, which means fawn or little black one, and that's of Irish origin as well. Then we have Donovan, which is little brown, black one, and that's Irish in origin. Then you have Dwayne, or another spelling of Dwayne, which means little and dark, which is Irish and Gaelic in origin. Then we have Dunham, which is dark-skinned man, which is Celtic in origin. So there's no ambiguity there. I mean, a dark-skinned man is a dark-skinned man, which is Celtic in origin there. Then we got Duffy, which is dark or black, and that's Irish in origin. Let's go down to Don Chad, which means brown warrior, and that's Scottish in origin. Then we have Fetchin, which means little raven, and that's Irish in origin. Then we have Gethin, which is dark-skinned. Again, no ambiguity there. Dark-skinned is dark-skinned, and that's Welsh in origin. Then we have Kern, which means little dark one, and that's Gaelic in origin. Then let's go down to Cole, which means swarthy or black, and that's English in origin. Then we have Colton, which means swarthy person or dark. No ambiguity again there, and that's English. And we have Colby, which is very common these days, and that means dark, and that's Norrish. Then we have Cronan, which means the swarthy one, and that's Gaelic in origin. Now let's go up to the second part of the list there. Let's go to Muriel, which means blackbird, and that's English or French. Then we have Maguire, which is dun colored or brown colored, which is Irish in origin. We have Nigel, which means black or dark night, and that's English or Latin. And then let's go to Darcy, which is dark, and that's Gaelic in origin. Dwyer, which is black, that's Irish or Gaelic. Then we have O'Dwyer, which is black, which is Irish in origin. We have Doyle, that's very popular. That means black stranger, and that's Irish or Gaelic in origin. And then we have Donnelly, which is brown or black man, Irish or Celtic in origin. Again, no real ambiguity there. We have, let's go down to Doltak or Dultak, which means black limbed, and that's Irish in origin. Again, black limbed, wow, okay, that's talking about someone's arms or legs, right? Then we have Rybach, which means swarthy, and that's Irish. And then we have, again, Sierra, different spelling, which means black or dark, and that's Irish in origin. Okay, so you can all go and find these names on the internet, and I obtained these names, meanings, and origins from websites that I have listed there below. I'll read them off to you. Nameberry.com, BehindTheName.com, BabyNamesDirect.com, BabyNames.net, Mommyin.com, and NameNerds.com. And along with searching for these names, I stumbled across quite a few other names and their meanings. And I'm referencing names like Hill, Rivers, Cross, Castle, Knight, Brown, Wolf, Banks. All these names have practical meanings. You know, they live by a hill or on a hill. They live by a river or by, on a river. They had crosses by their houses or whatever, or they built crosses, or they lived near castles or built castles. They were knights. They had brown complexions. They had a wolf as like their family totem or whatever, or that's what they identified with. And then banks would be, living near river banks or something like that. So all of these names had practical meanings, and they described something that surrounded the family in some way. Anyway, that's my opinion. That's my theory on it. I really hope you can look at my research and then go conduct your own to verify this information. And then maybe you'll see that I'll quote the TV judge, Judge Judy, who says, if it doesn't make sense, it's not true. So as I read these names and I think about them, I have to ask myself, why would parents that were white with white children name their children names that mean the opposite of what their child actually looked like? Unless, of course, the parents were actually swarthy, which means their children would be swarthy, and their children would be the same as them, with dark complexions, dark skin, brown skin, resembling a raven or a crow, or anything similar to that. So looking at this section of the video, in the middle there, it says 3 main theories. From what I've seen on the internet and journal, everyone, let's move on to this new section called Swarthy Europeans. And as you can see there on the top, I have a chart there with a majority of the human skin tones. And as you can see, there are different labels there. They range from pale, fair, you'll hear the word fresh, I don't have it there, but you'll hear that, fresh. Ruddy, which is like reddish. Then you'll have sandy, you'll have tawny, light brown, seguine. Seguine's like a reddish color, reddish brown. Then you'll have brown, and you have dark brown. And at the top you'll see circled there swarthy, and the 2 arrows indicating in between those 2 marks is kind of where I consider they're swarthy. Although sandy is also somewhat swarthy, because I'll explain that later. Okay, so there is only one way to have a swarthy complexion, and that is by having 1 or 2 parents or 1 or 2 grandparents that are swarthy. So one of the points that I want to make is, when the girl with the darkest complexion becomes an adult, she could possibly give birth to a child that could possess any of the skin tones you see there on the chart, even if the father was her same complexion. Okay, and then on the other hand, if the girl on the left with the pale skin tone becomes an adult and she procreates with a man of her skin tone, or even the skin tone of a fair or ruddy girl, she could give birth to a baby that had those 3 particular skin tones. The only real exception would be if the man was a light-complected person with some form of albinism, whose parents and or grandparents had a darker complexion. In that case, the baby could just be about any skin tone determined by the parents' combined DNA. And if you look over to the right there, you'll see a little green box around the young man that has albinism. And I'd just like to reiterate that that young man with albinism, both his parents could have dark complexions versus the pale girl on the chart on the left-hand side. Her parents are both going to have very light complexions or pale complexions. So in wrapping things up, it's basically you can go from dark to light, but you can't go from light to dark unless you reintroduce a darker complexion. Okay, so let's move on to this next section, and we're still dealing with swarthy Europeans. And again, you'll see my skin complexion chart there from pale to dark with swarthy indicated. And below there, I have just some of the descriptive names and adjectives of some notable swarthy Europeans. I'm sure if you're a history buff, you will recognize some of these names. The first one you'll see there at number 1 is Samuel Horsley, and he was born 1733 to 1806. He was a bishop, and his complexion was black as a raven. Just so you know where I got these descriptive names and adjectives for these historical people, it was from the actual books that were written about them. And if you saw my first video, or if you want to see my first video, I highly suggest that you do. These quotes and descriptions that I have here listed are taken directly from the books and pages that were written about these historical figures. Okay, so back to Samuel Horsley and his description, black as a raven. And you can see a raven there on the right-hand side. And you can see how dark it is and black it is. And that is the description for Samuel Horsley. Although when you look at Samuel Horsley's painting, he looks nothing like a black raven. And again, remember, in these books and passages, they use the word complexion. Okay, and complexion means skin tone. It doesn't mean hair. It doesn't mean eyes. It just means skin tone. All right, so let's move on to number 2, William Douglas, born 1370 and died 1391. He was the Lord of Nithsdale, called the Black Douglas for his complexion. And note here, he's not called the Brown Douglas or the Tan Douglas. He's called the Black Douglas for his complexion. Okay, so on to number 3, Thomas Wentworth, 1593 to 1641. He was the Earl of Stratford, and he was called Black Tom due to his complexion. Let's move on to number 4, Hugh O'Neill, okay, 1642 to 1660, Major General, called the Black Hugh because of his complexion. Number 5, Thomas Fairfax, 1612 to 1671, Lord Fairfax, called Black Tom due to his dark complexion. Number 6, Sir William Douglas, 1286 to 1330, of Douglas, called the Black Douglas for his complexion. Number 7, James Methuen, 1650 to 1706, Lord Chancellor of Ireland, referred to as a tall black man. Okay, there's no ambiguity there, all right? Number 8, James Drummond, 1648 to 1716, 4th Earl of Perth, had a brown complexion, okay, not a black complexion, but a brown complexion. Number 9, Agnes Dunbar, 1312 to 1369, Countess, called Black Agnes for her complexion. Number 10, Anne of Bohemia, 1366 to 1394, Queen of Richard II, had a swarthy complexion. Number 11, Thomas Butler, 1532 to 1614, Earl of Ormond, called Black Earl for his complexion. And then last but not least, up there on the right-hand side, number 12, King Charles Stuart II, 1630 to 1685, called Black Boy by his mother for his complexion. Not brown boy, tan boy, but black boy. So I hope you're understanding what I'm trying to say here is that they were swarthy Europeans, okay? There's no doubt about it. Also remember that these are just notable figures that were written about, okay? They didn't write about the average Joe, okay? The average middle class or lower class persons. So just realize that there were thousands of swarthy people walking around living their everyday lives. But, you know, generally books are written about important people, not just everyday regular people. So keep that in mind. Okay, so I just wanted to make this section of the video to reemphasize what complexion means. And I'll read again the definition from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, 1828. It is the hue or appearance of the skin, and especially the face. And the example they use in the dictionary there is a dark complexion. And as you look at the chart that I've assembled here, you have 8 individuals, 4 of which have a swarthy complexion and 4 that do not have a swarthy complexion. All these pictures I got from Google Images. The 4 individuals on the right-hand side that do not have swarthy complexions, they are listed in Google as being of Irish descent. Now, the 4 individuals on the left-hand side, Google considers them to be of African American descent, although, based on my research, folks, we don't know if they are from Africa at all. They could be from a lot of different places. But the point here is that they are swarthy. Now, you'll see this first blue box, and I put that around a woman that is swarthy, which is, if you look at her, she has like a medium swarthy tone. And then the second blue box I put around the gentleman below her, and he has a somewhat swarthy tone, skin tone, complexion as well. Now I'll move on to the gentleman in the red box, and he is much more swarthy, darker complexion. And then last I'll put the green box around the young woman who is very swarthy, very dark complected, and you could probably consider her dark as a raven, which is the complexion that they gave Samuel Horsley. Although when you look at his painting, of course, he is definitely not swarthy or dark as a raven. Now, when you look over at the non-swarthy individuals, you'll see that they do have dark hair, dark eyes, but they definitely don't have swarthy complexions. So when you read these historical books and journals and everything else, and they mention people with swarthy complexions, these folks don't have swarthy complexions. They have dark hair and dark eyes, but their complexions are definitely pale, fresh, fair, but definitely not swarthy. So there's definitely a contradiction in the explanation for why the Irish, Scottish, British, and even some of the other Europeans that are listed in books and novels and journals as being of a swarthy complexion. And it's not just myself and other people saying that these Europeans were swarthy. Benjamin Franklin actually listed a bunch of different swarthy nationalities from Europe. And back in the 1700s, when he spoke about these people, these nationalities as being swarthy, I believe they actually were swarthy. And in future videos, I'm going to get into what actually happened to these nationalities of swarthy people. Okay, so let's move on to this next section of the video. It's called Keywords, and I'll show you that. Okay, so the next section of this video I've labeled Black Irish, and I'm going to show you a bunch of historical American newspapers that happen to mention some of the key research terms that I went over earlier in this video. So I'm going to start on the left-hand side with Patrick Leakey. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but just some of it. Oh, and also this newspaper clipping was from the Pennsylvania Gazette, dated August 13th of 1767. And going on to that paragraph, it goes on to say, runaway last night from the subscriber living in East Calne, Chester County, a native Irish servant lad named Patrick Leakey, about 17 years of age, swarthy complexion, with black straight hair, rocks much in walking, and speaks with a brogue. And speaking with brogue, a brogue tongue or brogue, basically means it's like a heavy accent or like a country Irish accent. Now, right at the top of that paragraph, I've listed the key points that I wanted you to take out of that, which is the name, the fact that he's native Irish servant lad, he's swarthy in complexion, he has black hair, and he speaks with an Irish accent. So just as a point here, the article mentions Patrick as having a swarthy complexion and black straight hair. So if complexion just meant hair and eye color, then they wouldn't mention black hair, because it would already be a given that swarthy complexion meant black hair and eyes or dark hair and eyes, which obviously is not the case. All right, so we're going to move on to the other paragraph on the right-hand side, and that goes on to read, runaway from the subscriber in Lower Dublin, Philadelphia County, the 29th of July, last, an Irish servant man named Thomas Kelly, born in Limerick, but came last from Dublin, between 19 and 20 years of age, 5 feet 5 inches high, a dark complexion, very black hair, is an ill-looking fellow, speaks with a brogue. Okay, so moving on to the next section, also named Black Irish. This is a newspaper clipping from the Pennsylvania Gazette, dated April 22nd, 1778. And I'll go on to read this paragraph. It says, $80 reward, deserted from the 13th Pennsylvania Regiment, a certain John Gillespie, a stout, well-set man, about 5 feet 7 inches high, of a dark complexion, black hair, born in Ireland. I'm going to skip down to the second individual, Thomas Bigley, by trade a weaver, enlisted in the Carlisle, an elderly man about 5 feet 6 inches high, dark complexion, black hair, born in Ireland. Moving on to the next section of the video, I've labeled it Black Irish Immigrant, and this is from a newspaper clipping from the Pennsylvania Gazette, August 21st, 1740. And this is actually Benjamin Franklin's newspaper, and you can see there at the bottom, it says Philadelphia, printed by B. Franklin, postmaster. So I'm going to go on to read the paragraph here on the right-hand side. It says, runaway on the first instant from Richard Porter in Talbot County, Maryland, an Irish servant man named Patrick Downs, age about 25 years, of middle stature, black complexioned, with a black beard, by trade a tailor. Remember earlier in the video I spoke about Benjamin Franklin and his disdain for swarthy European nationalities. So being the publisher of this paper, he is describing people that are being looked for, that are runaways or deserters. So he's going to list these people's descriptions exactly so they can be found by other people. And lastly, let me bring your attention to those 3 asterisks there. It says, there is no mention that a black complexion was out of the ordinary or that an Irishman has a black complexion. Honestly, I think that if a black complexion on an Irishman was unusual, this article, as well as others, would mention that fact. Okay, so let's move on to another article, and again, this one is titled Black Irish Immigrant, and this is from a newspaper clipping from the Pennsylvania Gazette, dated December 25th, 1750, and again, this is Benjamin Franklin's newspaper. Okay, so the newspaper clipping goes on to say, 4 pistoles reward, and pistoles are gold coins, runaway on the 13th from the subscriber living in Chester County, Pennsylvania, an Irish servant man named James Ward, of a middle stature, about 23 years of age, dark complexion, down look, sullen countenance, can hardly look a man in the face. His beard and eyebrows thick and black, his hair cut off. I want you to realize that the people in these newspaper clippings, these runaways, are indentured servants. And basically an indentured servant is paying for their passage from Europe to the United States via a boat, of course, because these are very poor individuals that have no money. However, they do have time, and they are willing to give so many years of service in order to pay for that passage, and after that they can be free, or freedmen. I also want to quickly bring your attention to dark complexion. He had beard and eyebrows thick and black, and his hair was cut off. So again, if complexion meant dark hair color and eye color, then this wouldn't make sense because James Ward's hair was cut off. So again, I'm letting you know that complexion means skin tone, skin color. It does not mean hair color and eye color, as some would have you think. All right, so moving on to another